So what's up? I wanted to strike while the iron is hot and talk about church. I tagged one of my sisters, Monique, that goes to the church that I was going to for a while. And I did that not to be messy. If I could have, I would have tagged Apostle Jones. We friends on Facebook, and nothing that I do is never to be, now more than ever, is never to be messy. But I really feel like we need to have a conversation just about what our understanding of church is, because there's a lot of differing opinions about church. And Monique, if you're watching this, share it. I'm trying to get the conversation started. Anybody that watches this now or later, I need y'all to share the heck out of this mug, because it's not gonna be long either, because I'm on my way to go home to visit my family or whatever on my lunch break. But I just wanted to have the conversation, to keep the conversation going, because I feel that it's important for us who are Christians, who do have a familiarity with church, who may or may not be going to church right now at this moment. It's important for us to have this conversation about what is church. Is it a service? Why is it important to come to church? Like I said, Apostle Jones, who is my friend, who was my pastor, who is still a great man of God, somebody that I have his number and everything, we in relationship. The only reason I'm mentioning his name is because I know there have been a whole bunch of shiesty stuff in the past or whatever, but we passed that. So for anybody that think that this is that, it's not. So you can go ahead and move around, as my wife would say. But I think that it's important to have the conversation and to hear each other out about why we think church is important, or if it's not important. I think that it's important, especially in this day and time when we're in a climate where, people don't want to hear each other out when it comes to like race and stuff. It's important to have forums and to have conversations to where we can get on one accord, in one mind, about what we're doing, because where there's unity, there's power. And where there's unity, there's glory. And so my heart in doing things like this and doing lives and mentioning names is, the heart is, we've got to build and we've got to come together as a church. And so Apostle Mark Jones had made a post, and I shared it, and I shared in the caption what my reply was, because Apostle Jones was saying that, here's some examples of how Christians, how believers have been coming to church since the dawn of the church, the New Testament church. There is such a thing as a New Testament church, as well as the Old Testament church, which was specifically to Israel. So the church doesn't even get its genesis not from the first century. Maybe some people know, maybe some people don't, but the church didn't just get birthed and in Acts. There is such a thing as an Old Testament church that Hebrews refers to. So the church has always been the gathering of believers, and it was exclusively Israel, and then it spread out to the Gentiles. So you can say, for all intents and purposes, the Gentile church or the new church, the New Testament church, was birthed in Acts. I don't want to get too far away from what I'm saying, but basically he was saying, here's some examples of why church matters. Here's some examples of people gathering on the first day of the week. These are examples. And so the first thing I started off with was, and you can go and read it, first thing I started off with was, yes, I agree. But I said that the reason why people are leaving the faith, the reason why people are leaving the church, the reason why people don't want anything to do with the church, one is because there's a lot of mess that goes on in the church. Just like a club, anywhere you have people all together, there's going to be issues, because we are all people. Whether that's a religious setting, whether that's a school, whether that's work, whatever the case may be. Wherever there are people, there is going to be drama. But when it comes to church, why don't people want to come to church? Well, for obvious reasons, people don't want to come to church. They get church hurt or whatever. They don't want to be around people that hurt them. But we've got to look beyond that, because beyond that, the genesis of the church is from Christ. So how is it possible to have a bunch of Christ believers? How is it possible to have a bunch of people who have been born again, a bunch of people who believe the gospel? How is it possible for us now to not want to have anything to do with the fellowship of believers? We really have to critically ask ourselves, what is going on here? What is wrong? Why do we have so much schisms and isms? And my conclusive answer is that we don't focus on our head. We say we focus with our mouths. We say we focus with our mouths, but in our hearts, we really don't. And it shows by the focuses that we have. You know, we come to church, we come to the altar, you know, we focus on salvation for the purpose of getting saved and understanding that we have right relationship with God. And then after that, after we understand that, we give off this impression as people of God, as leaders in the church, we give off an impression that there is some greater subject to talk about than Jesus Christ. When all throughout the New Testament, as they gathered together, all throughout the New Testament letters, all I see is Peter, Paul, all these ministers, all I see is them pointing back to Jesus. And one of the main problems with church is that Jesus isn't being pointed back to. He's not being pointed back to consistent enough. He said, upon this rock, the revelation of Jesus Christ, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. People don't want anything to do with church. People are straying away from the church because people see from the outside and the inside that the church is not about who it's supposed to be about. Like, so we can't get mad at the fact that nobody wants anything to do with church because nobody wants anything to do with us. We can't get mad and we can't get angry at the fact that people want to leave the faith, want nothing to do with Jesus, in most cases as well. We can't get mad at the fact that people don't want anything to do with the gathering of believers because we don't want anything to do with Christ. It's practical. Come on, any of y'all that's listening to this, and please, if you listen to this, please share it. And you can go down my timeline and look at other videos. But anybody, just today, take a moment. Examine the message that you were under on yesterday. Go and look on YouTube. Go and look on Facebook. Go and look anywhere. And honestly sit there, listen to that message, and honestly critique it. And honestly ask yourself, am I walking away from this message with a greater appreciation for Christ? Is my mind on Christ as I'm leaving this space? Or is my mind on myself? The problem with why people don't want to gather, the problem with why people have a problem with church is because they understand that the church is not faithful to Jesus Christ. That's just it. If we're faithful to Jesus Christ, if we understand the faith the way that we're supposed to, we wouldn't be able to keep the church empty. We would have to keep on building buildings because the gospel is too good not to come to church. But we're not out here preaching the right message. And because we're not preaching the right message, there's all this other stuff going on. And it's causing people to want to leave. It's causing people to say you don't need to join the church. It's causing people to say I'm spiritual and I can have Bible study at home and all this other stuff, which isn't necessarily bad, but it gets to a certain point to where you'll realize and understand, hey, I need a bigger community. I want to raise my kids in a community where we're all encouraging each other in Christ. But if we don't get the first thing right, everything else is wrong. We got to get the first thing right. As my father-in-law would say, we got to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is Jesus Christ. We got to get back to Jesus Christ. We honestly have to be honest with ourselves and say, hey, I'm preaching another gospel. I'm preaching another agenda, or I'm focusing on something more than Christ. If we are honest with ourselves, if we are seriously honest with ourselves, we won't be able to keep people away from the church. But we have to be honest with ourselves, man. We have got to be honest with ourselves. I love the church. I never stopped loving the church. I just stopped loving all the foolishness, and I just started taking control of the fact that I don't have to submit myself under spaces with different focuses. I love Jesus. I want more of him. I don't want to hear about anything else. And I want to know about how everything else points me back to Jesus. And there's too much of us. It's too much of flesh in church. And all I'm saying is we got to get back to Jesus Christ.